Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome to fall, as the weather seems to have taken a turn for the cold. Although, actually, I kind of like this weather very much. It's brisk and makes you feel alive in a different way. So, I'm a big fan of autumn. It's one of the reasons I moved to Chicago and not to Phoenix. I wanted the seasons, and I may change my mind as I get older, but for now, I like four seasons. This evening, we're going to be talking about what it's like living as a Jew in diaspora. It's been a challenging couple of years, to be sure, but it's also been clarifying in some ways as we've grappled with some of the core questions of what our future is and what our present is. We, as usual, in our discussion Shabbats, have a short Kabbalat Shabbat or welcoming Shabbat service, which will begin now. As we often do, we start with a nigun, which is a melody where the words matter less than the fact that we're singing with each other. And so if you feel comfortable joining me, please do. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Bim bam, bim 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 bam, bim 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 bam. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat 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 shalom. Shabbat, 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 Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, Shalom, Shabbat, 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 Shalom. Bim, bam, bim, 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 bam, bim, 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 bam, and just hum. Hmm, 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 hmm. Shabbat is a time of memory and a time of peace. Jews have imagined Shabbat as a time outside of time, an echo of Eden and a hint of heaven. We remember our people's imagination and we add our own. As they recalled paradise, we recall family. As they envisioned redemption, we imagine peace. Shabbat is a time of peace and a time of memory. We begin Shabbat by lighting candles. The flames are symbols of light and inspiration, and their warmth surrounds us with the comforts of home and history. We learn and we celebrate together. I invite you, if you want to sing our candle-lighting song, Baruch HaOr, Let Us Light These Lights, as I light our Shabbat candles here at Kol Hadash. When we share wine as a community, as a congregation, as the Jewish people, we are connected to both past and future. The past is in the tradition, in fulfilling the same ritual as has been done for many centuries. The future is in the memories we create that we bring forward, and in the transmission of that tradition. Individual people die, but traditions of living peoples live on. This evening, I'll sing our Kiddush in Hebrew. If you'd like to join me where you are, please do. And then we can say the English together if you choose. Savri Maranan V'Rabanan De Etmol, Kidashnu Et Hayayin. Savri Maranan V'Rabanan De Hayom, Baruchim Borei Pri Hagafen. Hashabat Mesamcheinu, Hashabat Mechapenu, Legufotenu, Lenafshotenu, Hashabat Meashrenu, Baruchim Hashomrim Et Yom Hashabat. The rabbis and sages of old proclaimed, "We sanctify this wine." The rabbis and sages of today proclaim, "Blessed is the fruit of the vine." Shabbat makes us joyful. Shabbat heals us in body and in spirit. Shabbat enriches us. Blessed are those who keep the Shabbat. L'chaim, l'chaim, to life. And now a song that celebrates being together or celebrating together. Hine Ma Tov. Again, I invite you to sing where you are if you choose. A Song for Gratitude by Herbert Levine. What does it take to treasure each day, to give thanks for the gifts not earned, to savor the taste of every first fruit, and know that enough is as good as a feast? It takes a lifetime to learn how to live, to sort through the stuff that fills up our days, to weigh and measure just what to claim, and know that enough is as good as a feast. So sit at nightfall with those you love, and light a candle to greet the dark. Clasp hands as you bless the bread, and know that enough is as good as a feast. Open your heart to the joy and the pain, the bitter and the sweet of the knowledge you've gained, and sweetly surrender to what you can't change, and know that enough is as good as a feast.
Yeah.
Like awakening after a long illness to find your health stole back in while you slept, your sorrow, in its time, will retreat, and the knowledge you carried all along will reemerge, whole and cleansed. One day you will not thrash in the too bright light, looking for a corner in which to close your eyes. One morning the weight will not be there beneath your eyelids, the first thing you wake to. It will not settle on your tongue like a lump of salt. And because you have stayed this long, unrelenting in the unrelenting world, you know that time, though imperfect, is diligent and wrestles down grief, and that all things are born small and grow large, except grief, which is born large and grows small. At Kol Hadash, each Shabbat, we create a space for loving memory, to remember those whose deaths were recent, to remember those whose deaths may have been many months or years ago, but whose absence strikes us at this moment as meaningful and moving. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any names that you would like to remember. You feel free to unmute and share them, or you can type them in the chat, and I'm happy to share them as well. Tom Doherty, thank you. Let us pause for a moment of silent tribute to their memory and in memory of all of our loved ones. In Jewish life, we say Zecher Tzadikim Livracha. The memory of good people is a blessing. I see some other names as well. Jean's father, Andre, and his grandmother, Yolanta. So now we will hear a song of love. Okay, well, over my left shoulder is our congregational menorah with its 7 lights. Each light has many strands in that wick that come together to create light, and then together the menorah itself creates a shared light of our congregation and community. It's a chance for us to light candles of joy, to celebrate something wonderful, or simcha in Hebrew or Yiddish. It's also a chance for us to light candles of concern, of tsuris, of difficulty. And they can also be candles of zikaron, of memory, if you'd like to remember someone important in your life. So this is an opportunity to unmute yourself and to share for what reason you'd like a candle lit, and I'll be happy to light the menorah candle for you here. Judy, you're already unmuted, so go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to light a candle for Tom Doherty, who I mentioned before. He's my daughter's father-in-law. On Sunday, she told us that he was ill and that he went in for an x-ray. They thought he had pneumonia. They found out he had lung cancer, the cancer in the lung, and it has spread. And Tuesday, he passed away. It was so fast. So this came to quite a shock to all of us. He was here with his wife, and everybody was here last year for our grandchild's graduation from Stevenson High School, and he seemed fine, and he was having a back problem. He had some surgery. They didn't discover anything at that time, and that was about a year ago, June. So you just never know what's going to happen in the future.
Yep. Thank you for sharing. Ron and Tamara, please.
So I wanted to, there's two things. One is actually a personal thing, which is that I finally have found an ophthalmologist who seems to know what she's doing regarding dry eye. I have pretty bad dry eye because of the estrogen suppressant that I'm on, which obviously I have to stay on. So I'm grateful to have finally found a good doctor. And the other thing is that I was just really heartened to see what happened with the No Kings protest, and that following it, just to know that there's a lot of grassroots work going on to combat some of the, let's say, less than good things, some of the really bad things that are happening. So it gives me hope that there are people out there who are trying to do good.
Thank you. Rami, please.
So I'd like to light a candle for a number of people in my extended family who are here from Mexico, who are Mexican, and who are being terrorized in Chicago and in New York. And some are very close to me, some are further out from me, and some are terrified to leave their homes to go to work. And it's affecting my family very deeply and painfully right now. So I can't even hope for it to end at any time soon, but I'm lighting a candle for those folks.
Thank you. I'll light a candle. This is a candle of Simcha, I think. My younger child is turning 18 this weekend. So that means no more minors. The downside is you have to go through all kinds of hoops to be able to get access to their medical stuff now because it's all theirs, not yours anymore. And legal stuff and practical stuff and college applications and all that is, the hassle side of it. But the positive side is I've got two young adults and they are fun to be with. So we still like each other's company. Someday they will leave, but well, I hope. But in the meantime, it's been fun seeing them grow and mature and to relate to them as real people. So this is in honor of the passage of time, but in a good way. You're welcome to light a second one. We have seven total. We've done four. So if someone has moved for another purpose to light,
I can light one for myself.
okay.
So this week has been a very heavy duty medical week. And one was to have ultrasound of my thyroid that's having problems. And today I had a colonoscopy and they removed like 5 polyps. So my candle is that those polyps are nothing more than just polyps.
I hope so too.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm trying to raise my hand. I can't do it, but I'll speak. Can you hear me, Adam?
Yep.
Everybody, okay. I want to say we're light tonight, and it seems like there are very few of us, but Kol Hadash is still a very vibrant and warm and loving and expansive congregation. And I want to acknowledge Kol Hadash, even if most of us aren't here tonight.
Thank you. In this case, I'll light our last candle in honor of those joys that weren't shared or those concerns that may be too deep to share. You may have heard that there is a mayoral election taking place in New York City. The remaining three candidates are an independent, a Republican, and a Democrat-ish. Now, the leading candidate is the one on the Democratic Party line. His name is Mamdani. He is a democratic socialist. He is an unabashed democratic socialist, an unapologetic democratic socialist. And there is no question that he is Israel critical. He's also proven to be generally unwilling to alienate those even more hostile to Israel. So when he was asked what his opinion was of the chanted slogan, "Globalize the Intifada," which some people interpret as a call to resistance in general terms, and others hear as a call to massive pogroms everywhere, because for them, intifada is not resistance, it's terrorism. In his response to that, what would I do with that? He said, well, I didn't say that. I wouldn't choose to use that language, but he doesn't choose to condemn the people who do. Now, Mamdani is leading in the polls, somewhat substantially. And if there's no change, and if the Republican and the independent candidate continue to run, most likely Mamdani will win. The question that Jews are asking themselves in New York, but also elsewhere, is will Mamdani's election legitimize even more confrontational Israel protesting? Even more anti-Jewish yelling and vandalism and direct actions? I mean, we saw what happened on the Columbia campus in the winter and spring of 2024. What if the mayor doesn't say boo, doesn't say stop, doesn't deploy the New York police force? After all, we've seen what happens in the popular square when the president is relentlessly anti-immigrant. And in parts of this country, as we heard in our joys and concerns, it's very difficult to be an undocumented immigrant, and even to be a documented immigrant for that matter. Will Mamdani have Zionism litmus tests for public service in office? What if you're too Zionist for him? Will Mamdani fail to defend Jewish institutions? These are the fears that Jews in New York, and especially rabbis in New York, have been articulating. You may have seen some viral videos make their way around the last couple of weeks about this. Now that the IRS has said, we don't care if you endorse or oppose candidates, now the pressure is on. If this is an evil candidate from a Jewish perspective, you should endorse someone or condemn someone. This week, over almost 1,000, maybe over 1,000 by now, rabbis from all over the country, not just New York, have signed a letter decrying the Mamdani campaign and urging a vote for someone else. And yet, there's been some polling in New York, including polling of Jewish voters. And they found that something like 40% of the Jewish voters in New York are still planning to vote for Mamdani. They've rejected the Republican candidate, Curtis Silwa, whose most famous claim to fame is that he was the founder of the Guardian Angels quasi-vigilante public security group, and he still wears that red beret all the time. He's getting maybe 10, 15% in the polls because it's New York City and Republicans just don't have a presence there. And the other candidate used to be a Democrat until he proved to be a jerk. His name is Andrew Cuomo. And he did some bad things during the pandemic, and he did worse things to female people who worked for him and under him. And he was pushed out of office. And now he wants to return to some office as the mayor of New York, perhaps as a jumping stone for something else. Now, why is it that with all these problems with Zohar Mamdani, that 40% of New York Jews are still considering voting for him and not for one of the other non-problematic candidates? Well, the answer is that, first of all, they're Democrats. And many people reflexively vote for the party they've always voted for. Part of it is that many of them agree with Mamdani's progressive politics. They like the idea of free buses. They like the idea of affordable housing. They like the idea of a grocery store run for the people's benefit, aside from economic analysis, which is a different category. They want someone who will stand up to Trump. They want someone who pisses Trump off. And Mamdani certainly does that. And they're also voting more about cost of living questions and trying to tax the rich more than they are about Israel. There's an irony that Mamdani pointed out recently in an interview. There's a billionaire named Bill Ackerman who has been spending lots and lots of money to try and defeat Mamdani. And he's convinced it'll be the destruction of New York if he wins. And Mamdani pointed out, Bill, you're spending more money trying to defeat me than I would be taxing you. In a personal cost-benefit analysis, that's not a winner. Well, what would your vote be? Would you vote for Cuomo because of concerns with Mamdani? Maybe you don't agree with Mamdani's socialist economics. Or would you vote for progressive politics over Cuomo and his skeeviness, or Silva and his quirkiness? Well, the divisions in Jewish New York are along many different lines. There's an age division where younger people have chosen Mamdani. One person comments Cuomo, but by holding his nose. Anyone else care to share whom they would vote for if they had a vote?
I'd vote for Mamdani in a heartbeat. I also want to say that the concerns that there may be real concerns about Mamdani, just as we have real concerns about Israel. But when people say that the concerns are more important, just like when people say the concerns about Israel are more important and we say it's anti-Semitism, I think that the so-called real concerns have to do a lot with more Islamophobia than any real concerns about his program. And because of that, I think it behooves us as Jews that if there's any doubt whatsoever, we should try to counteract that very pernicious impulse of anti-Semitism, anti-Islamism, Islamophobia, and, to try not to fall into that trap.
I would somewhat reluctantly vote for Mamdani. I think Cuomo is not fit to be mayor after his sexual harassment scandal and the way he dumped COVID patients into New York nursing homes. So I'd vote for Mamdani if I were in New York.
People always vote for their party, no matter what they do. We had a candidate, he was a Democrat in I think, Lake County, was a sheriff or something. He switched parties. So my husband, who gave money when he was a Democrat, switched parties. My husband wanted to contact him and ask for the donation back. Same guy, just switched parties and was all upset about it. So some people, no matter who it is, if it's a Republican and they're Republican, they're going to vote no matter what. Same thing with Democrats. If they're a strong Democrat, it doesn't matter who runs. And I always wondered if Trump was a Democrat, how would we feel about Trump if we were Democrats? I have a feeling many of us would have voted for Trump, who would say, oh, he's the worst.
Well, I mean, protectionist politics of high tariffs, that's something the unions like. So, in theory, one could make an argument for at least some of those policies.
Judy, one of I was just rereading a book today called The Tyranny of the Minority by Stephen Levitsky and Daniel Ziblatt. And they point out that when you accept wrongdoing, this is chapter 2, when you accept the wrongdoing on your own side, it's not really a good thing. You have to really resist wrongdoing. They're talking particularly about violence, but I think it scales. You have to resist wrongdoing, even in your own side. And ultimately, you have to, because that is very anti-democratic. And preserving democracy at a critical time like this is probably what's more important than any particular policy decision.
You
I would
know,
recommend you read that book. It's a fantastic book.
the founding figures didn't want political parties at all. They thought that was going to be pernicious and anti-democratic. And, I mean, we've seen the effect of one-party rule in cities and in other areas that has led to its own corruption and problems. So I think that part of the challenge with Mamdani and the Jewish divisions over this is that in some cases it's an age question that younger people are more open to this, but that also dovetails with economic status. Someone pointed out in an Facebook post that made wide ranges in my circles this week that two of the rabbis who spoke against Mamdani represent two of the richest Jewish congregations in the world in terms of the affluence of the members and the assets of the congregations and so on. And so maybe part of their rejection of him is also an economic question, that if they represented a poorer congregation that was more dependent on social services, that would benefit from the free buses and the affordable housing initiatives, that their sentiments might be different and maybe they would weight their issues differently. Um, you know, the challenge is that Jews are not just Jews. They are Jews and in their varieties of identities. There are secularized Jews. There are Orthodox Jews. There are establishment reform or conservative Jews. There are affiliated Jews who are members of the organized Jewish community and synagogues. And then there are the unaffiliated Jews. And in New York, there are hundreds of thousands of unaffiliated Jews who are not part of the synagogue world and who are voting based on differing values. I think another fault line in New York is the line between having been in the US for many generations versus being a more recent arrival in your family. So people who've been here for a long time don't think of their Americanness as tentative. You know, my great grandparents were the immigrants. We've been here forever. But the people who have come in more recently, the Russian Jews, the Iranian Jews, the Israeli Jews, they're concerned about the roots and the viability even of Jewish life in the United States. They've had to move for a variety of reasons, often from hostility, if you think of the Russians, the Iranians, and other Jewish refugees. And so it could happen here if we don't push back. And so their fervor, their animosity, their bitterness over Mamdani's candidacy is a reflection of their concerns about what would happen here. Could it happen here as it happened there? I think one of the fault lines in New York is over what your role and priority of Israel in your Jewish identity is. If you're not someone who is very focused on the welfare and thriving of Israel, or have family there, or are economically connected there, then maybe what the government of New York does vis-a-vis the Israeli economy just isn't high on your list compared to affordable housing or buses or LGBTQ defense or immigrants' rights and those kind of questions. Ultimately, I think the key split on Mamdani is the sense of security you have as a Jew as a minority. There are parts of New York where you can live where you do not feel like a Jewish minority because there's 1 million Jews in New York out of 10 million or so in the metro area. And in some parts of New York, it seems like everybody is Jewish, or the vast majority of people are Jewish. So you are the majority, it feels like at times, and you don't have to worry about that. But this candidacy is reminding New York Jews that they are, in fact, a minority, and they're concerned. The question is, ultimately, do you trust the law, the establishment, and custom to accept Jews, to protect Jews, even if you had a mayor who wasn't that sympathetic to you? Could you make it work? Would you trust that things will be okay? Or do you need to be assured that our guy, the guy on our side, is in charge? Because you don't trust the establishment and the laws and the customs to protect you. Now, it's not an accident that this crisis in New York Jewry is happening after October 7th, where the system, the law, the Israeli military did not protect people. The norms of cultural intercourse did not obtain, and children and old people were killed as brutally as soldiers were. And so that sense of vulnerability, that sense of fear, has permeated the American Jewish setting as well. And we saw, as I mentioned, those campus protests and some of the things that happened there. We've seen a rise in anti-Semitic vandalism and violence, as we'll talk about in a little bit, even beyond the campus setting. And we've also seen what happens when an executive does whatever the heck he wants. And if what President Trump has done with regard to the White House, with regard to policies and other issues have concerned people because the norms and customs and legalities are secondary to what the executive wants to do, well, then what's to stop another executive in the city of New York doing what they choose to do? Telling the NYPD, don't take that call. Well, that's concerning. And that's why people are scared. And that's why the language is so violent and angry. Those protesters in Colombia and the people from outside Colombia that were saying even worse things to those on campus, that was a failure of the institutions and the norms and the Ivy League. Wasn't the university supposed to be the route to Jewish success? And here, and all these campuses, that was the place Jews felt most alienated and rejected. I think the Mamdani election is to some extent emblematic of the dilemma of living in the Jewish diaspora. Now, I just want to remind you what the word diaspora means. There's two pieces in Greek. Spore, like diaspora, a spore is a seed. And dia is like a diagram where you spread out something. So a diaspora is a spreading of seeds. Think of someone scattering seeds all over the Mediterranean for the Jewish context, or actually the Greek context, because the Greeks had a diaspora that spread out with city-states all over the rim of the Mediterranean, where you can find their ruins even to this day. And there are other peoples that live in diaspora. There's an Armenian diaspora. There's a Roma people diaspora, sometimes called the Gypsies. The Jews are perhaps the most famous diaspora, certainly for Jews, but there are other peoples that live in this dispersed status. But the question for us is, first of all, are we really in diaspora now? Because after all, diaspora has this sense of not where you came from. The Hebrew term actually is more negative. It's galut, which means exile. Exile is worst. Exile means you were forced out, or you're prevented from coming back. But is it really relevant for us to still use the term diaspora today? After all, we are free to return. If I wanted to sell my house, even if I didn't sell my house, I could buy a ticket today to Israel. I could show up and say, I'm here and move. But the vast majority of diaspora Jews haven't done that. In fact, there are as many Jews in America today as there are in Israel. I want to show you a chart of the population of Jewish countries all over the world. So here's a chart. We're going to start at the top. Doop. That's by region here. Okay, so here we have the countries with the largest Jewish populations. You've got Israel at the top with 7.7 million. You've got the United States with 7.69, so almost 7.7 million. You've got France with about 440,000, Canada 398,000, the UK another 300,000, Argentina 171, Russia 130, Germany 125, Australia 117. So you've got almost 10 countries that have 100,000 Jews or more, but only two that are the elephants in the room that have um, 7.5 roughly million Jews living in them. That's Israel and the United States. But you'll notice there's almost none in Poland, which is where many of us have our roots. There's almost none in the Middle East, which is where I have at least half of my family roots. You know, where we claim our ancestry from can be very different. I'm curious, if you had to pick a homeland, you know, where your people came from, you might say Israel way, way, way back. But I have a feeling a lot of people, if they thought about the old country, would, unless they were Israeli, you know, more recently, they wouldn't point to Israel 2,000 years ago. I would point to Belarus and Ukraine on my mother's side and Syria on my father's side. That's where we go back to. I'm curious for you, what are your homelands from which your family dispersed you here, put it that way?
Well, my grandfather was born in London and my grandmother was born in Poland, and that's from my mother's side, and my father's, they were from Russia. My
Mhm.
father was born in Russia, which when I found out he couldn't run for the presidency of the United States when I studied this in school, I was very disappointed.
So Gene comments Poland for his family.
Okay, I traced mine as far as I could to Ukraine. Uh, One side, my father's side, were from a shtetl outside of Kiev, where my grandparents were first cousins. And on my mother's side, they started out in Odessa on the more urban side and moved through London, where my mother was born, onto Canada. And the internal tensions between my grandmother and on one side and my family on the Canadian side was the typical rural versus urban tensions that went on. And part were secular and part were Orthodox. You can determine which one was Orthodox.
Right. So, Ram, are you going to jump in?
Yeah, my grandfather on my mom's side was born in Kiev, but he considered himself Russian, not Ukrainian. So I don't know what I would consider myself. He was the only one I spoke to about origins.
Hmm. Rami?
Yeah, so we have family from Lviv, so they would say that they were Ukrainian, not Russian, and then from Germany, but also then Eastern Europe, like Lithuania and Latvia.
Hmm.
My father's family, his mother's family went back to Germany. His father's side was Russian, but I wasn't really raised on that side. I was raised by my mother's family, and her parents came from Romania early in the
Yeah,
in the
Romania.
20th century, Romania,
Yeah.
which is what I really identify with.
Hmm. So, to claim that the Jews are simply in a diaspora from Israel, when we have all these other homelands and places that we find our roots. Ironically, my father's homeland might be Brooklyn, because that's where he was born and raised. And then he was raising me in the Midwest. So he was in exile from Brooklyn by moving to the Midwest. But to claim that there's Israel and the diaspora is everything else miscellaneous is flattening all this diversity. In Hebrew, actually, that's how you refer to the world. There's haaretz, the land, which is Israel, and then there's chutz la'aretz, which is outside the land. That's just miscellaneous, everybody else, the other 99% of the world. And to think about where Jews live as Israel or miscellaneous is not a meaningful distinction. And it's not how people live. I don't see my roots as miscellaneous. I don't see my identity today as miscellaneous. It's this citizenship, it's this nationality, it's this cultural experience in which I've been raised. And the irony is not just that all these Jews who were free to return to Israel in the last 75 years haven't done it. It's that in many ways we're more free as Jews in the diaspora than we would be in the homeland of Israel. If you're gay or queer and you want to marry your partner, you can't do that there through this government systems. If you're secular and you want a secular ceremony, you can't do that through government systems. If you are of mixed parentage and the mother isn't the Jewish one and you want to get buried in a cemetery, you can't get buried in a state cemetery there because the Orthodox define all the personal status issues. I couldn't work as a rabbi there because the Orthodox rabbinate accepts rabbis and they reject Reform rabbis and conservative rabbis and humanistic rabbis too, and congregations. If you want to form an Orthodox congregation, you work through the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and if you get 10 people to sign up as members, they'll give you some funding to help fund a rabbi. If you want to fund a non-Orthodox congregation, which includes a couple of secular congregations I know of, you have to get 250 members together who then apply to the Ministry of Sports and Culture, and then they can get some funding to reimburse them after they paid the first year of salaries. They get reimbursed for salaries but not paid in advance. It says in the Israeli national anthem, Lihyot am chofshi, to be a free people in our land. But in some ways, we're more free to be Jews not in that land. Jews have a long history as a world people. I love one of Sherwin Wine's lines about Israel. He said, it's a very strange homeland where when you go there, everyone asks you, where are you from? Because everybody in Israel came from just about everybody in Israel came from somewhere else to come there. So then there are French Jews in Israel that have their own French Jewish communities and English-speaking Jews in Israel that have their own community. So as much as it's a homeland that draws in from everywhere. That's the result of our history of being a world people. And our experience living in, for lack of a better word, diaspora during the 20th century showed us the best and the worst of diaspora possibilities. Now, the worst includes oppression under SARS and Soviets and Nazis. It was fleeing refugees who found the doors closed at the worst possible time. That terrible experience of the ship called the St. Louis, which had Jewish children fleeing Germany in 1939, that was turned away in Cuba and was turned away in Florida, was turned away in New York and had to go back to Europe. And the vast majority of those people died during the Holocaust. That was the experience of diaspora. That's the experience of being at the mercy of other powers and countries. Even if they had made it into America in the 1930s, there was significant discrimination and hostility against Jews. Thousands of Jews chose themselves to change their names, not just the Ellis Island story. Many Jews went to court to change their names because if they were too Jewish, they couldn't make it, even in the Golden Medina, even in the promised land of America. And we also experienced, even in democracies, that our rights sometimes depended on popular sentiment. The Weimar Republic in Germany from 1919 to 1933 was a wonderful democracy. It protected all kinds of freedoms and was a wonderful building ground for early movements for gay rights and studying even transgender identity and creative cinema and all kinds of progressive ideas. And then gone. Or think about the lives of Jews living in Arab lands, where they had lived for centuries, sometimes for millennia. And after the founding of the State of Israel, one by one, those countries turned against their native Jewish populations, blaming them for what had happened in Israel, persecuting them to the point that they had to flee. And now there are very few Jews left in any of those countries where there were thousands and tens of thousands of Jews living for hundreds of years. If our status and our stability and our security is based on the whims of the popular sentiment, then what today has turned against one population might tomorrow turn against us. And of course, at the worst of the worst is murderous violence. From pogroms in Russia to the Farhud pogrom against the Jews of Iraq in the 1940s to, of course, the Holocaust and its disasters. But of course, the diaspora experience has not been all disaster. In diaspora, we've experienced integration and success under democracies in Western Europe. There are thousands of Jews still living in the UK and in France and in other Western democracies. In Latin America as well, there are tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Jews living in Mexico City and in Argentina and in Chile. And of course, the United States and Canada have been almost paradises when it comes to that, certainly in the last 75 years. We've experienced social and economic success. The average Jewish income and college education is much higher than the general population. We've experienced political power. We are overrepresented in the Senate and the House in this country. And by the end of the century, the end of the 1900s, even being publicly anti-Semitic became socially unacceptable. So we had made it. It is possible to do. But in the last decade, we've seen some of those worsts come back. We had that violence just this year. I don't even have to go back more than a couple of months. Just this year, we had that violent attack on a synagogue in the United Kingdom during the high holidays on Yom Kippur. We had anti-Semitic vandalism and graffiti hit a synagogue in Vernon Hills. There were some Jewish teenagers hanging out in a park in Skokie this week who were verbally harassed and had to flee. We've seen over the last 15 years or so in France a continuing rise of anti-Semitic actions, often fueled by the Algerian and Moroccan immigrants to that country, which have brought with them some of the prejudices of their own native countries. And this is not Islamophobic, this is demographic and opinion studies show that the Middle East and North Africa hold some of the most anti-Jewish sentiments. In this case, the rise of actions in France have gone from vandalism to attacks on Jewish schools and rabbis walking in public. There was a kosher supermarket where hostages were taken. I mean, it has been very difficult for Jews in France, and it has led to increased emigration, many of them to Israel. In the year 2000, there were about 600,000 Jews in France. And you saw that chart, there are about 450,000 Jews in France today. That's a decline of 25%. That a quarter of French Jews have gone somewhere else. If that was America, and you had even an eighth of American Jews leave, that would be 1 million people. A quarter of American Jews would be more like 2 million people leaving. And yet French Jews are very committed to Frenchness. After that supermarket hostage-taking incident, that terrorist incident, Benjamin Netanyahu, who was the prime minister, went to one of the major synagogues in Paris and spoke, and he encouraged them, come to Israel. This is where you'll be safe. And at the end of his program, they played music and started singing Hatikva, the national anthem for Israel. And when the strains of that song died down, the people in the audience themselves spontaneously started singing the Marseillaise, the French national anthem. They would not choose Israel over France. They want Israel and France. They are very Zionist in supporting Israel, and yet they were not willing to say with Netanyahu, we're all leaving, symbolically by singing the anthem. They sang the Marseillaise in addition, not instead. We've seen, after October 7th, increases in anti-Semitic actions in the UK and Australia, but we've also seen strong government support for the Jews in adding security and public statements against anti-Semitism. You may not know it, but the wife of the Prime Minister of the UK is Jewish. So he knows something about this community's experience. We had a very strong response, eventually, to those campus protests in the spring of 2024 from university administrators and, of course, also from the Trump administration. There's, of course, a debate over whether that anti-Semitism appeasement accusation is used as a club to attack universities, but it is certainly standing up strongly in defense of Jewish communities and individual Jews. The question we have to ask ourselves is whether the Pandora's box has been opened, and that in the aftermath of October 7th and the war in Gaza, that anti-Israel feelings have gotten so strong that they've, in many cases, become anti-Semitism. Not in all, of course. You can criticize Israel without being anti-Semitic. Or maybe there's a kind of latent anti-Semitism for some people in some populations that's gotten permission to come out. And once it's out, it's hard to get back in the box. Just this week, I read a headline that the International Jewish Film Festival that normally takes place in Malmö, Sweden, has been indefinitely postponed because the theaters refuse to show the films because of security concerns. The question is it really security concerns, or is it the films not wanting to participate? Or if there are security concerns, why are they allowing that to stop what should be a free expression moment? So it's a very complicated dynamic, but it's also very concerning. Ultimately, we as diaspora Jews have to decide, can we only trust us, Jewish organizations, their explicit allies, or the state of Israel? Or are we safe if we trust all of us and make coalitions with other groups and advocate for rights, and then they'll advocate for our rights too when they are threatened? Now, there's another source of anxiety I just want to touch on, and we'll talk about more in December, and that is something called Christian nationalism, which has become more and more assertive. This past week, Kash Patel, who is the director of the FBI, had a post on his social media that wished everybody a happy Diwali. As you may know, Kash Patel himself is Hindu. And the comments in response to his post were overwhelmingly, don't bring those foreign holidays here. In America, we are Christian. We do Christmas. America's a Christian nation. And they're telling him he is foreigner. He's out. Or you may have seen this quote by Chip Roy. Chip Roy is a Texas representative who's one of the leaders of the Freedom Caucus. In response to the No Kings rallies that took place, this is what he said. This is a direct quote. The truth is, the Marxists, the radicals, and the Islamists the Democratic Party promoted this weekend, they cannot handle the truth. And the truth is, there is a king, and that king is Jesus. And this president has been willing to say it, his administration has been willing to say it, and Charlie Kirk was willing to say it, and he got killed for it. There is a king, and that king is Jesus. That's a Christian nationalism. That's America as a Christian nation. Now, can Jews be comfortable in an explicitly Christian nationalist America? Well, some would argue they're pro-Israel. They're anti-Semitism. If that's the concern, then we should go with it. After all, the more Orthodox like the idea of money for religious schools. They like the idea of pushing back on LGBTQ rights. You know, ironically, one of the areas that has been pushing back on displaying pride flags is the very democratic town of Dearborn, Michigan. Now, Dearborn, Michigan is also one of the strongest proportionally populations of Muslims and Arabs in the country. And they found common cause with the religious right on pushing back on the Pride Revolution. Now, historically, American Jews have supported separation of religion and government. They worry that as a small minority, giving money to religious schools is going to overwhelmingly benefit Christians and not Jews. After all, I remember a survey once when George W. Bush started what he called the Office of Religious Initiative, something like that. And they did a survey of people and they said, do you like this idea of having more government money going to religious institutions? And Christians were generally supportive, but the support went way down when they realized that Muslim institutions would also get money. That's not what I meant, they thought. Or that's not a real religion, they thought. But when those are the people making decisions, then it may not be good for the Jews to have a Christian nationalist America. We'll talk more about Christian nationalism in December, because we'll be experiencing the benign version of Christian nationalism called Christmas music. That is a not so painful version of Christian nationalism, but it's still there. It gets worse. But we'll talk more about that in December. The ultimate question for Jewish identity, and I want to conclude with this, is that we have to decide where are we going to focus. When the Zionist movement started, its first conference was in Basel, Switzerland in 1897. And the very same year that the World Zionist Congress was founded, another large international Jewish organization was started. It was called, for short, the Bund, which was a Jewish labor movement. The ideology of the Bund was, they sometimes called it Doigkeit, here-ness. What this meant was that if we're going to fix the problems of the Jews, it's not going to be fixed somewhere else, like Palestine, Israel. It's not going to be fixed in a different language, like Hebrew, that most people don't know. It's not going to be fixed with some kind of radical revolution of the geopolitical order to create a Jewish state. They wanted to work within multinational empires to guarantee Jewish rights and to be able to celebrate their Jewishness in the languages they already spoke. They focused on Yiddish, which most Jews in Eastern Europe spoke. They wanted to fix Jewish life here by changing their own societies. Now, they were revolutionaries too, because under the Tsar, you want to be a socialist, you're pushing back. But the question was there or here, some other language, some other place, or what we're speaking here and now with us. I remember arguments with Israelis who we were making coalition with as humanistic Jews here and secular Jews there over whether you really could have a diaspora secular Jewish identity. For Israeli secular Jews, you need a Jewish language, surrounded by lots of Jews, in a Jewish environment with public schools that are teaching Jewish history. You need an intense and vibrant and surrounding community. And maybe you had that if you spoke Ladino in Thessaloniki in the 1930s, or you had it in Kiev in the 1920s in Yiddish, or in Warsaw, even in the 1930s. But now, in English, in America, it's thin, they argued. And we said, it's good enough. Personally, I refuse to choose there or here, us or them, Israel or the diaspora. I support, in Israel, the existence of an Israel and a positive Jewish and democratic state that can find a way to live in peace and security with its neighbors. And I also support a vibrant and positive diaspora Jewish identity that doesn't call itself a diaspora because I don't feel like I'm not where I belong. But I'm willing to face these real challenges of dispersion and diversity and managing the complexities of neighbors and coalitions that we might agree on free busing and we might disagree on other issues. The United States is my home. And when I vote, Do I factor in what's good for the Jews or what's good for Israel? Yes. But it's not only that. I am not a one issue voter because I contain multitudes, to use that poetic line. There's a perennial diaspora question that we ask all the time. Is it good for the Jews? Is the diaspora good for the Jews? Well, if your answer is no, then pack your bags and end of diaspora for you. But my answer is that the Jewish dispersion is and will be, whether you like it or not, and that diaspora, dispersion, being a world people can be good for the Jews if we work to help create a society, the kind of society in which we flourish. Diaspora means a spreading of seeds. And when you spread seeds in many lands and many soils, they may grow up very differently in different times and places and climates and fertilization and water and soil. But diversity is a strength for growth, for survival, but also for flowering and flourishing. And for me, the diaspora has that kind of vibrant future ahead. Any last comments or thoughts or questions? Please.
I just think that some of these surveys, especially in London, England, that had this anti-Semitism, they don't spread out who's doing it. These are the influx of the Muslim immigrants in Sweden and in England has caused these problems that the English people haven't learned how to deal with, or these people don't want to integrate and be part of the country. As you're speaking, that we want to be part of the United States, they still see themselves separate. Now, you don't know if they believe themselves are being separate or the community of English people forced them to be separate.
Well,
as Jews were in the ghetto, they were forced to be separate.
Sure. And those the Algerians and Moroccans in Paris also have that kind of, slum community of their own. But the challenge is that there are different kinds of anti-Semitism. There's not only one kind. So in England, you can get sort of an elite snobbish anti-Semitism. You can get a working class sort of empathy with the downtrodden that the Irish have for the Palestinians. And you can have the immigrant dynamic of of people coming from Arab and Muslim countries who have brought the anti-Israel hostility with them, and they take the Jewish star from the Israel flag and apply it to any Jewish star, including on a synagogue. And so there's not only one answer to these sources and the problems. The challenge for the Jews is now they feel like they are working with each other, and so some Jewish politicians are supporting anti-immigrant parties. And you think, why would a Jewish funder support an anti-immigrant party? Well, the immigrants they want out are the people they see as a threat. And so that motivates this empathy for that side. Judy, please.
This is a little off the topic, but when you went around asking people about where they came from and all, our women's group did a genealogy, and that was, I think, the best talk we had, the best chat. It lasted way past the hour, and everybody wanted to tell their story. And after it was done, about the next service I went to, somebody approached me, one of the men in the congregation said, I would have loved to have been there, but it said women's chat. So I promised him I would do it again in the spring and include everybody, which is starting with the everybody chat. We're going to do some women, some men. So I'm just doing a little advertising of the group, but hopefully that will have some of the men who want to be part of it. Let them join. It's fine with me.
I'll mention one last source of optimism that I have, and that is that if you talk to Jews in the 1920s and 30s, they could never have imagined the flourishing of the Jews of the 1990s. That we wouldn't have barriers to college admission, that we wouldn't have quotas, that we wouldn't have places we couldn't buy houses, jobs we couldn't apply for. I mean, that was the norm. in the 20s and 30s in America, and it changed into a much better setting. And if we're dealing with challenging moments now, where if you're a literary figure, it's very hard to get bookings in stores and so on, and that people are asking you if you're a Zionist or not before they'll host you for a speaking event. I mean, that kind of area discrimination is terrible, and we have to grapple with it. But that doesn't mean it's permanent. If it changed for the worse recently, it could change for the better as it has in the past. There is that potential in this country and in the people in the country, if we handle it well, and if we continue to advocate for the kind of country that accepts all kinds. Well, thanks for joining us for our service today. I want to share our service one last time for our closing song, which is wishing each other peace, love, and joy. Peace be with you. Please feel free to sing along. Again, I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom, and feel free to wish Shabbat Shalom to everyone else.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Stay
Shabbat
well,
Shalom.
everybody.